infrastructure developments and creating new places to live, work and gather. I think this is a great opportunity and great topic, with Noor Riyadh being on at the moment, about how they've animated the city and the communities around that city and the places and spaces. I mean, I'd really, so maybe I can just introduce myself. And Assalamu alaikum, mahabara. My name is Robert Frith. I'm the creative director at ITHRA, which is a cultural centre in Eastern Province, in Tehran. I've been working with them for 8 years and really seen part of that change of creating a destination which has turned into a place and a space, and most importantly ended up being an amazing community. And joining me tonight is that we have Nadine Abdul Jafar, and we have Sarah Foriam Lola. And do bear with me, I'm a substitute moderator for this evening, so I've been given these notes about 5 minutes ago. And so we're going to generally kind of open up this topic. And I'm replacing Candida Pestana from Alula, who's the contemporary art curator, who was also the previous contemporary art curator at ITHRA. So I'll share her apologies, and I'm sure she'll be with us hopefully within about 40 minutes to join the discussion from the airport. So what I wanted to kick off was maybe we could have introductions from each of the panelists, tell us a little bit about yourself, and basically the relationship to the topic. We've all had a couple of weeks to think about this and have a take on it. And I think myself, as maybe I agree and disagree with some of that introduction of the title. And maybe Nadine, you could start us off.
Hi, I'm Nadine Abdel Ghaffar, the founder of Cultivator and Art d'Egypte. We're mainly famous for the crazy exhibition that takes place at the pyramids in Giza, Cairo. So I've been working in the art world for over 15 years as an art advisor. And publicly in 2017, I went up to the Minister of Antiquities and told him I want to showcase contemporary art at the Egyptian Museum. So it was a crazy idea at that time. And now we reclaimed the pyramids after 4,500 years with contemporary art and a dialogue with the ancient Egyptian civilization.
And you said earlier that you have to rent the pyramids.
I do rent the pyramids. Everyone laughs, but that's the sad truth. There's someone at the back who also had to rent pyramids for the Dior fashion show. So yes, I do rent the sand, because I don't only rent the event space, but unlike a lot of institutions worldwide, we have our public opening prior to the private opening, since our core mission is to democratize art. So out of respect, we do the private preview as the public preview, and then the private comes 2 days after that.
Thank you. And Sarah, maybe you can introduce yourself.
So hi everyone, I'm Sarah Foriam-Lola, and I'm the Public Arts Manager at Tadouria Gates Development Authority. We currently have a public arts program, and it's really about activating the sites and the stories and the legacy of Diriyah. But I was also head of curatorial planning in Qatar Museums. I was part of delivering the 30 new commissions, which turned Qatar into an open-air museum of over 100 public artworks now when you go visit. So this is my background. I've been in the field for over 10 years now, 5 years in public art specifically. And public art to me is really about fostering space and identity and ensuring that there are participatory methods and community involvement when it comes to public arts. So I think the same as you had mentioned, there's a few kind of things when it comes to, let's say, the word placemaking and how we want to work on placemaking, what is our definition of placemaking, and I think, it becomes almost a buzzword where everyone wants to do placemaking and it's in every strategy. So I think the key question, and I'm really looking forward to kind of discussing today, is what is placemaking to everyone here as well?
And maybe that's a good question then to go back on. What do you see what the term placemaking actually is?
I think it's quite an interesting word because, placemaking is really about trying to foster a place and an identity. And it's really about trying to involve all of these different collaborators to think of who is there in that place, who are we trying to tell stories about, or do we invite those people to tell their own stories? And for example, there was a program that we had where it was really about looking at focusing on a street art program and inviting local artists to participate in that. And for example, this was when we had to look at this idea of truck art. So in India and Pakistan, there's a huge format of truck art that when you see these trucks, they're intricately decorated. And a lot of these truck drivers are using these trucks 60% of their time on the road. So the truck becomes a home to them. So when you are presented with a project like this, the question is, whose story are we telling and who should be telling these stories? So for me, placemaking is really about looking at the story we're trying to tell, and when we need to pass the mic to those people, we need to be passing those mics.
So that's really interesting between you as a curator and maybe as an institution and working with a community. Where do you see the artist's role is in that, and where do they position themselves between that?
I think the artist is a really, really important role when it comes to placemaking. And it's about really working with the artists closely and encouraging them to think about that when they're creating art, they might be telling their own personal story, but they might also be telling the story of various other communities or histories. For example, with Daria specifically, we're looking at a legacy and a history of hundreds of years of different stories and different community-based stories. So of course, you're going to have local artists, international artists, and regional artists, but we're focusing a lot on the idea of having local artists telling those stories particularly. So artists are a way or a vessel in order to translate the stories that we're trying to tell, and they're super integral to telling that story, and for them to also branch out to the communities they're trying to tell those stories of as well.
I'll tap onto that because actually this happened, so we had two editions at the Pyramids. The first one was in 2021, and the curatorial direction was a dialogue between the artist and this ancient civilization. So it was, the artist was here the narrator of this civilization, and the same for the second edition. And then we discovered that it went viral, and we had over 1.5 million visitors in those two editions. And then we discovered that so many people are coming, people that have nothing to do with art, they're not art enthusiasts. I had school trips, university trips, and even the horse and carriage guys at the Pyramids were actually becoming the guides to tell people stories about the artwork, and they were there talking to the artists. So as you said, the whole community came together, even the workers. We have 150 workers. You can see the installations are huge. And the workers, it became like a national pride. Even the workers start talking to the artists, even though they don't speak the same language. And this turned so big that the curatorial direction for the third edition was incredible. We said, okay, it's a case study. People are actually participating and part of the experience. We have young people that started doing songs, choreography around the artwork. So the direction, this past edition that was in October, we ended on the 18th of October, was creating a trilogy between the artist, the audience, and the heritage site. And it was incredible. We had an incredible turnout. Not an easy ride, but an incredible turnout. So the audience is part of the artwork. The interaction with the artwork. So here in Azza Qubesi's artwork, it's like a maze. So you have children going in and out, and of course Rashid al-Sha'shai was one of the most beautiful artworks. And it's also, if you're curious enough, it's like the real pyramid, there's a hidden door. So you actually go inside the pyramid. So I guess this is really, really important to interact with the audience. As you said, it's public art. It really belongs to the public and the audience.
I definitely agree with that. And to go back to the mural making of the truck artist, so part of that story was about saying, okay, I am not from that community. How do I tell the story myself? So through the curatorial practice of research, we went and worked with Pool Party from Pakistan and All India Permits, who are both platforms that work with truck artists themselves, and we invited them over to create this mural. But what was very beautiful about the entire process was, one, the location itself. The location was not in the glitz and glam or in high-rise buildings, it was in a neighborhood. This neighborhood was specifically the South Asian community where they lived, and it was about saying this mural is for you and your community, because sometimes we might use the word community quite loosely, but which community are we actually talking about as well? And the artist had painted murals for 2 weeks, and you could see the neighborhood children who used to play football or cricket or their bikes across, they were there and participating in this mural making as well. At the same time, what was very beautiful and quite interesting was the artists themselves were incorporating the comments from the neighborhood onto that mural as well. So we found that even the artists themselves were changing their mural ideas as they went around, because someone would come to them and say, oh, you didn't put my language on your mural, oh, you didn't put my symbol or my flag. So you could see the artists themselves responding to the community, and those community members are part of that neighborhood. So when they walk past the neighborhood, when they are just walking on their daily commute, they feel like they're actually connected and attached to that mural as well.
Yeah, I think this is very important, because this is sustainability, is when the community comes together and they know that they are really part of this. We had this in 2019 because we did an exhibition in Shara al-Mu'izz, which is one of the oldest lived-in streets in Cairo. It's 1,050 years old. And the idea was to have the whole community. We had a cultural theater. There's an open-air theater there. And this is how we started with the Art Guides program, actually. At the beginning, they were called the Guardians of Heritage. And we have the UNESCO on board. And we had these young boys and girls participate with us and see the work we're doing, because part of what we do also is Egypt is very different than a lot of countries, of course, in the GCC, because, as you know, there's no budget. It's the other way around. So we actually help by redoing lighting, by doing a lot of things. And if I leave tomorrow and go to a different space, then at least those young boys and girls in this street take care of the things. They tell their brothers, no, don't throw garbage here. We just redid the lighting. They just redid the bathrooms. So this is what you're saying is really the real example of sustainability. Otherwise, all these efforts go in vain. So this is very true.
So these are all great examples of going into the community, going into neighbourhoods, working with those existing communities. But what we're seeing in a lot of cities is massive development. Riyadh is incredible for that, creating new places, new destinations, new buildings, new whole cities and neighbourhoods. And they don't maybe not have existing communities yet. Where do you see the role of public art and artists in creating, making those communities or being a part of those new communities?
I think there's various ways to do that, because, for example, if you're working on a completely new city, you can only start imagining the type of communities that are going to be either living there or visiting there. But at the same time, you can start with just the history of the place itself. So these new cities that are being built, prior to that, there is a legacy, there is a history before that. So I think it's really about identifying those stories that you can tell, the past stories, the future stories, and even the present stories. And then from there, I think every community member might find some spark with one of these artworks or one of these public artworks. I think with public arts, it's something where not everyone is going to like it, not everyone is going to understand it or get it, But I think the idea of public art is really about that dialogue that sparks. Even if you don't like it, there's a dialogue about it. So I think when it comes to these new cities that are being built and identifying these communities, there's various ways of doing so, but I think it's about taking on board that we have so many different cultures and communities in Saudi, and each city is going to have its own representation, its own kind of dialogue with its history, and allow those artists to kind of delve into that and find something that might be meaningful to them first, and then trying to connect that with the other communities that might be in that area.
I'd just love to respond to that. There was, in the previous panel discussion with Ahmed Matter and Karsten Holler, they were talking about the artist's role as a job, right? And that was really interesting in terms of, well, a job is something that's in the community. I mean, they were talking about it's an undefined job. They get to make up their own job. But, you know, just even terming it as somebody's job in the community, I thought was really a valuable piece. I mean, because as these new communities grow, there's the artist, there's the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. You know, like, I think that was something that I took away from that previous panel, is the importance of a community recognising artists within their community.
I definitely agree with that, and I think it also comes down to the curator as well. The curator is there to care for the collection. It's there to care for the different stories that we're trying to tell. So I think the curator in itself is where the curator can curate a way of telling those stories with those artists.
Yeah, and I also believe that at the end of the day, as you said, I mean, Ahmed is one of the first people that moved here. But as you said, there's a coffee shop, there's a stationery shop. He might go buy something from the stationery, and then it just happens also organically. You can't really force it, but by talking to people and by involving the people around you. We do a lot downtown Cairo, in Tahrir Square, where DCAF has their exhibitions. This place is very close to my heart as well, because it's really the heart of Cairo. And part of our mission is really to be where everyone can come, not in a certain space or gallery or white cube or something that looks pretentious. I literally take over an old shoe factory or an old juice bar, or as a matter of fact, the Cinema Radio, which is a 1930 Art Deco cinema that was closed for a very long time. And I have children from the neighborhood that just come in and look at some of the digital art as if it's a cinema. And this is incredible, because sometimes I walk down the streets and I find families that come up to me and they're like, when is the next exhibition? And this really creates changes. Art is a very strong tool, and culture is, soft power is really, really, really a strong tool. And even though these people are not exposed to art, where we don't have a museum of contemporary art, or the Museum of Contemporary Art stopped buying maybe in the 60s, so it was a reaction to something, to give something back to the public. And art should belong to everyone. So it is us and our mission as curators to come to those spaces and have people interact with that, and I think it's food for the soul.
Maybe at this point I could share a little bit of the challenges we had at ITHRA. So you talked about the kind of white cube spaces, or these kind of we literally look like a spaceship that's come from the stars, and we're up on the hill. We're a little bit away from the community in terms of that density that you definitely have in Cairo and here in Jax. And what I think we hit a turning point, and actually it was during COVID that we as many institutions, we had to close our doors, and it forced us out of our
comfort zone.
Yeah, comfort zone, but also our place. You know, our place we have a beautiful place that we've made, but also, you know, during COVID it forced us to add the most important element, which was the community. And so through some of these pictures you'll see that we did close our doors. We did go online, but we did a parade through the streets. We literally paraded past people's doors during lockdown. You'll see that we have this big ring road around the building. You couldn't come in the building, but you could drive past us. So we're going to bring the cultural elements to your window of your car. And that really turned our relationship with the community. And I think as a kind of gleaming, shining castle on the hill, it now becomes an amazing community space. There's an example here of, this is a great example. This is a drone show, but this is 3,000 people collaborating with 200 drones to make a light artwork. These are all participating in making art, participating with each other, with technology, with the institution as well. You mentioned briefly about internationally, about placemaking, about communities internationally. Maybe you could mention your initiative around Cultivator and how maybe what you've learned, Nadine, can be transferred.
Well, I was born and raised in Alexandria, so it was a city of culture, very close to archaeologists such as Jean-Yves Empereur, and very different people. Dr. Muhammad Awad, who also tried to safeguard all the old houses of Alexandria. So it's a bit different. The challenges are immense. Since we had 7 editions of Art d'Egypte, from the Egyptian Museum to Manial Palace to Shara al-Mu'izz, to also paying tribute to Adam Hanin, the amazing Egyptian sculptor that passed. The day I told him, you're going to have your artwork at the Egyptian Museum, he cried. He was almost 80, and he's like, I became a sculptor at the age of 8 through a school trip to the Egyptian Museum. When he passed, I said he must be the first artist at the pyramids. So we did a whole exhibition just for Adam Hanin with his foundation to pay tribute to him, because he actually worked on the Sphinx. When the Sphinx had an issue, at that time the Minister of Culture said, I cannot have an engineer work on the Sphinx, it has to be an artist. And Adam Hanin actually worked on the Sphinx for over 8 years. So it's incredible, these stories, and I think in the cultural world it's very difficult to separate. So you cannot separate fashion from heritage, from design, from art, from music, from theater. And so a couple of years ago, we launched Cultivator, which is a global cultural consultancy, to be able to help other initiatives and institutions to create strategies, to help in a lot of different ways, to support with the programming. We have over 200 art guides that graduate from our program every year. And I guess we had so many challenges, so we're quick on problem solving. And we also worked on the Dior show in Cairo last December. And even now, fashion houses, I mean, there's the Lady Dior bag, which they work with artists. They also work on the design chair with different designers. So I think it's very important to look at the cultural world as one thing. I mean, you worked with the trucks, for instance, and murals and so many different mediums. So it's all linked.
Definitely, and I think, adding to that as well, when we talk about public art and placemaking, sometimes we're talking about trying to identify the communities, and sometimes there's no community necessarily there yet, but then you want to activate that space for the community to feel like they would like to go there. So there's, for example, this, I'm thinking the next slide, it's an artist, Najla El-Zain, and she created these beautiful benches and seating that kind of spiraled and twisted across this plaza. This plaza was an area that no one had ever gone to. It wasn't activated. These are their seats here. And it's really about, different communities, families, kids coming together and experiencing this type of seating. And you can lean on it, you can sit on it, you can balance on it. And again, it activated a space where a lot of people did not necessarily go to, and it wasn't necessarily specific for one community, but it allowed the community to come and experience it simultaneously. And I think that's really the beauty as well, where sometimes it's not about only looking at one community, but also utilizing art to activate spaces that might not necessarily have been active previously as well.
That's really interesting. It reminds me of a project we did. It was called Play Tactics, and is with a group of architects and artists, and they went around the city and identified places where people played. Not the football grounds, no, not the formal places, but the informal places of play, and mapped them all. And it was beautiful because then the relationship with the development and the Regional Development Authority, they could see that there was actually the informal uses of those spaces. And I'm just very interested in that project where there's existing communities already identified or existing uses, but they're below the radar, you know. And I think that's really important as curators or directors to help to identify those and preserve those.
Definitely. I think if anyone's seen, there's a slide with cricketers and it's the shelter. So for example, with that project, it was quite interesting because we worked with an architect and an artist, Marco Bruno and Michael Perrone, and it was about them on their daily commutes going around the city of Doha and realizing that there were communities playing cricket, but just in derelict areas. It wasn't a cricket ground, it wasn't an official cricket area, it was plots of land that maybe were supposed to be built on or constructed on, and they found it quite interesting. But of course they're playing out in the sun, they're just finding these derelict areas to play cricket every Friday morning. So these two artists, really looked into this, how can we activate those spaces as well? And they created these really stunning shelters where it would, one, allow the teams to sit, communicate with each other, at the same time shelter them from the sun. And these were really interesting activated spaces. One, when we're looking for the location, we're trying to figure out who owns this plot of land, one. It's in the middle of the city, it's just an open area. Sometimes they're owned by private people, sometimes it's a land that someone's going to be building their house on, but for that time being, it is the cricket ground every Friday morning. So this was, an interesting way of looking at locations and then looking at who is actually utilizing that location and how can you activate it. So it is a temporary activation until, of course, someone decides to build their house on that land. But of course, having that temporary activation allows for immediate kind of usage of public art too. So I know sometimes we discuss a lot about, public art being temporary or permanent and what's better and what's more sustainable. But, even temporary uses can allow for that immediate reaction to the community's needs.
Really keen, there was an example earlier from Nadine. Even the pyramids, right? Is there and the work you've done in the different areas of Cairo, are you seeing a new narrative growing up from those communities about those places and spaces?
Look, it's incredible. Every space had a different story. So we were talking earlier about historic Cairo. It was very strange to see a bunch of girls. Ala here is on my team. So we're a team of women. And we were walking down the streets of historic Cairo. And of course, it's a very conservative area. None of us are wearing veils, and we're down the streets of Cairo, and I wanted to place art in a complex. The part of the complex is a mosque, and of course the director was not for that at all. And it took some time, and I introduced him to an artist. Her name is Shireen. She did her PhD on Islamic art and architecture. He saw her artwork, he fell in love with the art. He's like, but this is Islamic architecture. She's like, yeah, I did my PhD on that. He's like, okay. And he completely, his mind opened up to the idea of having this art that was Islamic art. And then I'm like, I'm glad you met Dr. Shireen Girgis, who is Coptic Egyptian. So she's Christian. And then that was like the question, how are you Christian and you studied Islamic art and architecture? And so that's why I say art is a very powerful tool. And contemporary art is very important because it raises questions. And it completely opens minds of people. And today, this director is our #1 fan. And we have placed art everywhere in Qalawun, which is a complex that had a madrasa, a school. It had a therapy area. It was one of the first areas maybe in the world when Europeans would burn mentally ill people. Egyptians would help them with the sound of water and music. So we had therapy way before a lot of other countries. And I think art as well is the lens of society today. So whether we're talking historically, the Egyptian Faculty of Fine Arts was established in 1908, so way before a lot of countries in the West. And there's a narrative, I think, that is very important, and I can see it fast-tracked here in Saudi and in a lot of countries in the GCC, and we're happy to be part of this. I call it the Renaissance, because in reality, there was a Renaissance. Who knows that in Jeddah there was public art ages ago, years ago. Mohammed Saeed al-Farsi had Miro in Jeddah. So again, I think this is also reclaiming our narrative. And that's why Shara al-Mu'izz, the title of our exhibition was Reimagined Narratives. And I think this is very important to show all these amazing initiatives happening in our region. And this renaissance and these amazing young people. I mean, even though I am from this region, but I'm so proud of all these young people really pushing forward and doing amazing things every day. So there are so many stories, too many. I think I'll write a book very soon.
I think, as you said, there's so many stories, and for me and for a lot of us who are coming into the kingdom to work here, I think it's really about us asking whose story are we telling and when is it time to let other people or the people from the region tell their stories as well. I think that's very important.
I really saw so much discovery yesterday at King Salman Park. There's lots of families and kids exploring all the artworks. I think that was just a really great grassroots engagement, and hopefully they come away with lots of stories around that evening and their winter in the park. I'm going to open it up to questions, if that's okay, for about 10 minutes of Q&A from the audience. I don't know if we have any mics out in the audience. Yes, there's a mic at the back. So if you would like to ask a question, put your hand up. Please tell us who you are, and we'll try our best to give a response.
Hi, my name is Conrad Shawcross. I'm an artist. I'm in this exhibition in this warehouse. Yeah, I think the thing about, I've done a few public sculptures over the years, but I think the thing about place, it's one of the things that is maybe distracting about that word, is that an artwork is nothing unless it's perceived. And the wonderful sort of very leveler about art or conceptual art is that if you make a good work of art, you kind of lose control of its meaning. It becomes, the ownership is on the viewer. And so whether that can be a 3-year-old child, an academic, or some very powerful art critic from the vanguard of the art world, but actually the most important thing about placemaking is that you have this incredible, this opportunity to engage with a much more diverse audience, rather than just a sort of trendy art scene or whatever. And so seeing works in a different context is really important, but it's nothing without the people that inhabit it. And so every person, based on their history, their gender, their sexuality, their love, their trauma, will see something different in an original work of art. If everyone sees the same thing, it's definitely not a good work of art. So it's what's really extraordinary about that is that there's life-changing moments that can happen when someone, a young child or a young person, sees a work of art and they have some kind of epiphany, and that's when it can really, I mean, you can ask anyone in the art world the same question: what's the work of art that made you want to get involved in art or become an artist? And everyone has a different story, but there's definitely, everyone knows that moment that happens, and that's what's really exciting. Those sort of lightning moments. So the things you're doing here is really exciting in this sort of brave new territories where people are sort of less exposed to this stuff. It's really exciting because you're not. It's really there's so much opportunity.
Maybe I think that's a really good point, and I go back to Nadine's comment actually around the diversity of art forms as well, because you do want people to have that magic lightning bolt moment. You know, where does that inspiration come from you? And it's surrounding people with more and more things. You know, like in terms of opportunities to be inspired by theatre or by dance or by contemporary art, because how people connect with different objects, experiences, places is really important, and we need to create more of those opportunities. I mean, Noor Riyadh, wow, so many opportunities to experience the city.
Janet Eckelman, artist in the Wadi Namar of the Piece of the Sky. This is a question for Sarah. Nadine narrated some of her images, and some of the images you have shared are so enigmatic and are not obvious. There's this orange triangle in the sky that hasn't come back around, and this kind of wooden pavilion that's also yellow and orange. If you could talk about those when they'll be around in a moment. And if you could talk about time and how, when commissioning long-term or permanent works, how you can embrace change.
That's a very good question. I think when it comes to public art, a lot of people who are not necessarily in public arts think it can be done in like a week or 2 weeks, you know? It's something that's, I'm sure we've all experienced it, where we've been asked to do public art and it needs to be done quickly and it needs to be done, you know, straight away in the next 5 months or 4 months. It does take time, you know? So when it comes to public art and change, this is where temporary and permanent can really play and take place. So when you're looking at permanent artworks, that's going to take time. Sometimes, for example, you're working with a whole new city, you need to wait for parts of that city to be even built before we start installing and activating that location, or even encouraging the artist to understand that location itself. So when it comes to public art, you need to be agile. During COVID times, we were working with artists where the artwork got delayed a year or so, literally because, you know, there's certain things, it's a steel shortage, or there's, you know, a tragic happening has happened in a country. So these things do take place when it comes to public art, and you have to be agile. And the most important thing about public art is you're doing it for the public. You're not trying to reach a specific deadline for a specific event all the time. Yes, there are events, for example, this, where it is a temporary activation, but it has a long-lasting impact. And that's the most important thing. So when it comes to temporary works, something like this program is fantastic because it has that long-term, you know, effect. And when it comes to the more permanent works, I think it's about identifying the stories that even once kind of given to the community and they're launched, they're still quite relevant to various different communities. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but definitely time is a huge factor when it comes to that. And I think, for me, my motto is always, let's take our time and do it right, rather than trying to do something that's just a quick fix to say we've done public art. And I think that's where placemaking comes in, where it's kind of becoming a bit of a buzzword, where everyone wants to do placemaking, but they might not necessarily realize it takes time to do placemaking, and it takes time to work with all of these different factors involved.
Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. There's a hand here.
Hello. One of the great things for the public art, the name of the festival, like Noor Riyadh or wherever it's now. Actually, my question for Nadine put some light about the name and the philosophy of behind that.
Well, forever, because actually, I mean, the pyramids is the ancient world wonder that was not lost. So For me, it stands for a lot of things, and of course, each artist has their own translation to that. But it's really a token of hope to humanity. I think it stands for humanity. And the day, so also to know the history, the editions that were done before Forever is Now, whether Eternal Light or Reimagined Narratives or Nothing Vanishes, Everything Transforms, was only local artists. It was only Egyptian artists. And when I finally convinced the government to take over the pyramids, and that was a big challenge because, of course, the archaeologists were completely opposed to this crazy idea of putting ugly contemporary art in their own translation to the pyramids, and also was very intimidating to a lot of artists because, I mean, at the beginning, everyone was looking at it like, are we competing with the pyramids? No, we're not. We're actually in dialogue with the pyramids. And when that happened, I said, okay, this cannot, it belongs to humanity. Heritage belongs to humanity. It does not belong to one nation. It belongs to humans. From whichever country, wherever in the world, it does not belong to one nation. So what this stands for is it's a token of hope to humanity. And this structure has withstood so many things, wars, pandemics, everything, and it's still there. So so that comes, that is where the word forever comes. So hopefully humanity will prevail forever. And the now is us, is the people of today. If you go to the pyramids as a visitor, you're going to go once, twice. But when you repurpose it and tell the story in the eyes of artists whom are the people of today, then it's a different story every time. And you translate it, the language of the past, into the language of today, into no language, because the artist does not need to, me as a visitor, I don't need to speak a certain language or be from a certain country to identify with the artwork. So that's the beauty of it. And in my opinion, more than ever, I didn't want to talk about that, but more than ever, our opening was coinciding with what is happening in the region. And so many people advised us to cancel. And I completely refused because we are non-political and non-religious. I really, really, really believe that art is a safe space where all humans get together, no matter what. And honestly speaking, it was such an amazing turnout and such a successful edition. We had 14 artworks versus 10 every year. And the coverage was incredible, and it really gave hope to so many people. So that's, I guess, the message behind Forever Is Now.
I think that's a really good summation. I mean, the curators yesterday said Noor Riyadh was a real vehicle for dialogue. And, you know, from coming from ITHRA, the King Abdulaziz Centre for World Culture, I think these models of international dialogue, local dialogue, community dialogue, intergenerational dialogue is really important. And hopefully you've seen tonight how that can really empower community, empower artists through the creation of art. So thank you very much to our panelists, and
thank you to you
enjoy
too.
the festival.
Thank you.